While he remained there like a statue, the sound of the tomb guard's feet reverberated across the holy ground of hallowed Memorial Park. Turn, take 21 steps and pause. Nevertheless, a shadow moved within the crowd. A man who had icy eyes and a concealed firearm watched and waited at the scene. For the tourists, he was nothing more than a familiar face. From Michael Tran's perspective, he posed a danger to the tomb and everything it represented. Within the span of a single heartbeat, a regular patrol would transform into a lethal confrontation, one in which a single action may shatter the silence that surrounded this sacred location. The following events would leave the crowd unable to express themselves, and the preparations of a runaway would be ruined. I would like to know, before we delve into this narrative, where you are watching it from. Leave a comment below and let us know. In addition, if you are of the opinion that principles such as honor, bravery, and self-sacrifice are still relevant, then you should join us in preserving their heritage. At hallowed Memorial Park, the morning of the autumn was cool and crisp. It was the kind of day where the air had a fresh and clean feeling to it, and the sunlight transformed the rows of white headstones into a glowing sea of honor. Michael Tran stood watch at the tomb of the unknown soldier. He wore a navy blue uniform that was spotless, his kepi hat was tilted just so, and his sunglasses reflected the reverent atmosphere of the location. Every single action was accurate. 21 steps, a sharp turn, 21 seconds of pause, and then the cycle started all over again. It wasn't only a matter of obligation for Michael. It was a sacred trust, a commitment to honor those who had sacrificed all for the purpose of serving the country that he cherished. Michael, who had served in the Army Ranger and had completed 2 tours of duty in the Middle East, was 32 years old. He had witnessed the anarchy of war and experienced the weight of judgments that were taken in a matter of seconds. Now, in his role as a tomb guard, his world was one of discipline, and each step he took was a monument to those who had never returned home in their lives. His senses were razor acute, having been honed by years of training and instinct, despite the fact that he presented himself as stoic. The rustle of the leaves, the murmur of the travelers, and the rhythm of his own heartbeat were all things that was brought to his attention. On that particular morning, there was a man who did not belong among the crowd that had assembled before the grave. The leather jacket that Lucas Petrov, an international fugitive who was 42 years old, was wearing was too polished for a casual tourist to wear. He was standing on the edge of the viewing area. While his beard and hair were well groomed and slicked back, he exuded an image of sophistication. However, the scuffs on his combat boots revealed a different story. A history of violence full of missions and shadows. Lucas was a ghost who had evaded the authorities far too many times, and Interpol sought him for terrorism and armed smuggling. He was wanted by Interpol. Today, he was here with a plan. His palm casually resting in the pocket where a CZ-75B handgun that had been modified for silent kills was waiting for him. Michael's every action was followed by Lucas's eyes, but not with the reverence of a tourist but with the icy precision of a hunter. But his attention was focused on sightlines, security holes, and the rhythm of the guard's patrol. He took a few photographs with his camera propped up so that it would blend in with the surroundings. He mumbled something under his breath, and Michael was able to pick up on the fragments that were carried on the breeze. These fragments were symbols of hubris and American weakness. Michael was absolutely unfazed by the words. He had heard even worse. Nevertheless, there was something about Lucas's attitude that triggered warnings in his gut. It was too balanced and too controlled. A retired librarian and former Army nurse named Elizabeth Nguyen, who was 68 years old at the time, was directing a group of schoolchildren around the cemetery just next to them. The volunteer cap she wore concealed her gray hair, but her eyes were as piercing as they had been all along. Due to the fact that she had spent years working in combat zones to treat wounded soldiers, she has a sixth feel for peril. When Lucas stopped by her information booth earlier, she saw that he was asking strange questions. He inquired about guard schedules and security cameras with a hint of curiosity. While she was observing him hovering close to the tomb, she experienced that tingling sensation of dread once more. During a small gap in Michael's patrol, she approached him while pretending to rearrange a brochure display. She managed to get his attention by moving closer. Her voice was hardly audible above a whisper when Elizabeth spoke. The expression on Michael's face did not change, but he gave a slight nod and his eyes flickered toward Lucas. "Michael, that man in the leather jacket. He's asking too many questions. Something's not right." He resumed his patrol, but at this point, all of his senses were focused on the unknown individual. The actions of Lucas were too meticulous, and his stare was unusually clinical. The tiny asymmetry that screamed concealed weapon was something that Michael noticed when he noticed the bulge that was hidden under the man's jacket. Even though his heart rate remained constant, his mind was already working out angles, distances, and the results of the situation. A mixture of families, veterans, and tourists made up the audience, and their voices combined to create a low murmur that contrasted with the seriousness of the grave. There was a young couple that took selfies. Children were seen holding American flags in their hands. And there was a group of veterans with gray hair standing there calmly, their eyes moist with the memories of the past. Lucas, who was one among them, walked closer to the viewing area of the tomb, weaving his way through the crowd with a casualness that gave the impression that he had been practicing. He came to a stop next to a low barrier, and his hand came close to brushing the edge of his jacket. Michael was acutely aware of the motion, and his instinct informed him. They were not tourists at all. This constituted a danger. The voice of Lucas pierced through the air, low but determined, and it was directed toward Michael. "Quite the show you put on here, soldier. All this pomp and ceremony for what? A dying empire." His accent was smooth and nearly neutral, but it had a steely edge like steel beneath velvet. "It's a dying empire." In accordance with the protocol, Michael did not answer, instead maintaining his gaze focused on a distant point. However, he meticulously documented every aspect of the situation, including the manner in which Lucas's weight shifted to his right leg, the whiff of gun oil that emanated from his jacket, and the way in which his fingers twitched near his pocket. Something was odd, and the crowd started to notice it. With a frown on their faces, the young couple lowered their phones. With her expression becoming more tense, a mother drew her children closer to her. The veterans looked at each other, their posture straightening as they did so. Elizabeth remained in close proximity to her booth as she saw the unfolding events, her palm hovering near a button that might be used to make an emergency call. Before, she had witnessed this kind of tension at field hospitals, which were places where danger lurked in the midst of the tranquil moments. She made a quiet motion as she touched the button, trusting that assistance would arrive in a timely manner. Lucas moved closer, decreasing the volume of his voice to a hiss that was intended solely for Michael. "You stand here guarding a tomb while your country is falling apart. Multicultural chaos, weak leaders, a nation that is too weak to survive. We see it. We are ready to show the world how fragile your symbols are." His hand moved to his jacket in a slow and deliberate manner, like a snake uncoiling itself. The beating of Michael's heart was slow. It remained stable, with his training taking control. He was aware that the subsequent few seconds would revolutionize everything. The sunshine reflected off of the blue steel of a CZ-75B pistol as Lucas's hand emerged from hidden concealment. The crowd let out a gasp, a woman muffled a cry, and the veterans reacted instinctively to protect the children from an imminent threat. Lucas was so appreciative of the moment that he held the gun low, not yet aiming it. He spoke the words, "Beautiful, isn't it?" in a tone that was almost reverent. As he switched off the safety with a quiet click, the sound reverberated like a thunderclap in the astonished hush. "Modified for precision. 15 rounds of truth," he said. "This is where your ceremony ends, guard. One shot and your sacred tomb becomes a headline." Michael's eyes stayed fixed forward, and his posture was impeccable. Nonetheless, every muscle in his body was tense and ready. The ambushes in the dusty countryside and the disarmed militants in the packed markets were nothing new to him. This was the same as before. He followed Lucas's position, which was his Eastern European military training that had been modified by years of working in Black Ops. Custom craftsmanship was visible on the grip of the gun. The wear patterns on the barrel suggested that it had been used in real-world situations rather than for range practice. Both Lucas and Michael were not bluffing, but neither was Lucas. An indication of advanced training was the fact that the fugitive raised the pistol in a manner that was both leisurely and theatrical. His finger was resting alongside the trigger. He teased the guard by asking, "Any last words, guard? Any defense of your precious system? Or will you die like your country? Silent, weak, clinging to empty traditions?" In a display of terror, the crowd was completely still. A young child moaned as he was cradled in the arms of his mother. Elizabeth's gaze was fixed on Michael, and her confidence in him proved to be unwavering. One of the veterans reached for a cane as if intending to use it as a weapon as they stood ready. Time appeared to drag on, and each second seemed to last an eternity. Despite the fact that Lucas's eyes were shining with triumph, his fingers started to curl toward the trigger. Next, Michael made a move. We are not talking about the ritualistic steps of a tomb guard, but rather the lethal accuracy of a veteran of combat. His gloved hand rushed out of his pocket in a flurry, securing itself on the slide of the pistol with a grip that had been honed through countless hours of practice. Michael was able to twist the weapon before Lucas could respond, and his fingers were able to locate the precise pressure areas that was necessary to free it. It appeared as though the gun fell out of Lucas's grasp and into Michael's possession, as if it had never been in his possession any longer. The motions that Michael made were like a ballet of efficiency. He pressed his thumb against the magazine release, which caused the clip to fall out of its grip and settle in the other hand. According to the weight, it was completely loaded, with brass bullets shining brightly in the sunlight. With a flick of his fingers, the slide was ejected, and the chambered round was released in a smooth arc. What sounded like a bell was the sound of the 9mm bullet striking the stone patio. The safety is on, the chamber is empty, and the weapon is locked. It took less than 3 seconds. All of the people in the throng blinked, and several of them later claimed that they had seen nothing more than a flash of white glove in Lucas's empty hand. The expression on Lucas's face changed from one of amazement to one of wrath as he stood there motionless, his smug veneer shattered, his fingers grabbing for air. Michael interrupted him with a voice that was calm but carried the weight of authority. "You!" he growled, but Michael stopped him off. His gloved fingers followed the frame of the handgun, his research being of a clinical kind. Modified trigger assembly, Montenegro craftsmanship, subsonic ammo, Serbian spring. Approximately 2,000 rounds fired based on the barrel wear. You chose the wrong place and the wrong man. Desperation took the place of strategy as Lucas rushed forward. However, Michael was prepared. Using the grip of the pistol as a pivot, he moved the rear sight down in a precise arc, bringing it into contact with the bridge of Lucas's nose. The fugitive's leather jacket was stained with blood and cartilage, which crunched and sprayed like blood. As Lucas stumbled, he clutched his face and spoke with a voice that was thick with pain. "You broke my nose." Michael's response was chillingly unflappable. The audience erupted in whispers as the speaker said, "I neutralized a threat to this sacred ground. The broken nose is incidental." Some of the audience members cheered, while others remained bewildered. Elizabeth steered the children and their families in the direction of safety, maintaining a steady tone despite the commotion. As the veterans nodded their heads in agreement, one of them said, "That's how it's done, son." As the security team from Hallowed Memorial Park got closer, sirens could be heard wailing in the distance, and their volume increased. Michael managed to keep Lucas at bay, despite the fact that the fugitive had lost his swagger and his blood was dropping down the square like a countdown. Lucas spewed forth, "You'll regret this," as his words stumbled through the blood's presence. "We're everywhere. This isn't over." There was no flinching in Michael's eyes. "It was over the moment you drew that weapon. You didn't notice the silent alarm that was triggered 2 minutes ago, or the cameras that were catching your face from 6 different angles. City police are sealing every exit as we speak." Lucas's face turned pale as the sirens became increasingly louder, and police vehicles came to a stop nearby. Michael remained in his position, the pistol firmly grasped in his hand, and his posture reverted to the appropriate level of ceremonial sophistication. Lucas was placed in handcuffs and dragged toward a van by a large number of armed security agents who swarmed the plaza. When Michael was contacted by a detective, he had his notes ready. "That was some move, soldier. Got anything on this guy?" Michael had a solid and professional tone to his voice. Suspect carried a modified CZ-75B, likely sourced through Balkan networks. His stance suggests paramilitary training, Eastern European, possibly Serbian. Check Interpol's database. His accent and ideology matched known extremist profiles. At the same time that his eyebrows lifted, the investigator was scribbling frantically. With a tablet in his hand, One of his cops went over to the scene. "Sir, facial recognition just pinged. This guy's Lucas Petrov, wanted for multiple attacks across Europe. Interpol's been after him for years." A gloomy nod was given by the detective. After taking a quick look at the blood trail that Lucas had left behind, he said, "We'll have his face on every news channel by tonight. That nose won't let him hide for very long." Nice touch with the rear sight, by the way. Not a single expression changed on Michael's face. The CZ75B sight is effective when applied with proper force. The suspect will need medical attention within hours, making him easy to track. The investigator laughed and shook his head in agreement. "We'll need a full statement later, but for now, anything else?" The eyes of Michael, who was always on the lookout, searched the perimeter. "Check underground clinics in capital cities' eastern districts. He'll likely seek treatment from Balkan expatriate networks." Around the same time as the police fenced off the area, life in Hallowed Memorial Park started to return to normal. Now that they were at a safe distance, tourists watched as forensics teams recovered the ejected bullet and recorded the blood trail that had been left behind. The volunteer cap that Elizabeth was wearing was slightly asymmetrical as she approached Michael, but her eyes were beaming with pride. Softly, she said, "My husband served in the Marine Corps. Buried here unknown to most. You honored him today, Michael." "All of them." Michael looked directly into her eyes, his voice soft yet resolute. "It's what we do, ma'am. For them." An individual who had served in the military, a wiry man who had a silver star pin, walked up and offered a respectful salute. "Army retired," he shared with me. "That was textbook, son. Reminded me of Nam. Calm till it's time to move." The salute was reciprocated by Michael, who displayed impeccable form. "Thank you, sir. Just doing my duty." The grizzled veteran smiled. "Duty? Hell. You're a damn fine soldier. Standards haven't slipped since my day." Long shadows were spread across the plaza as the sun descended below the horizon. As if nothing had occurred, Michael began his patrol, taking 21 paces, turning and pausing for a moment. The gleaming medals he wore each told a different tale of self-sacrifice and dedication. As they gazed in astonishment, the crowd's whispers were filled with reverence for the individual. Michael was pointed at by a small child who was holding his flag tightly. "Mom, is he a superhero?" There were tears in his mother's eyes as she smiled. "Something like that, honey." Reliving the day in his head, Michael did not do it with a sense of pride but rather with a calm determination. There was more to the tomb than just stone and marble. The heart of a nation, it served as a constant reminder of those who had paid the ultimate price with their lives. Despite the fact that Lucas Petrov believed he could pollute it, he had grossly miscalculated the men who were standing guard. Michael's thoughts moved to Elizabeth's husband, to the unknowns who were buried beneath the tomb, and to the many more that were buried over the hills of Hallowed Memorial Park. It was intended for them. Lucas's rants were becoming less audible as the police vans drove away, and the detective's radio was crackling with updates as they were being broadcast. The earlier activities of the fugitive had been closely monitored by surveillance cameras, and hospitals were placed on high alert. The net was getting tighter, and Petrov's broken nose would serve as a shining example of his presence. He did not require Michael to be informed of the result. He had achieved his goal. The grave was secure, and its respect was not degraded. By the time the afternoon turned into nightfall, the tranquil beauty of the cemetery had not been altered by the bustle of the day. The footsteps of Michael reverberated softly, each one a promise that was kept. His thoughts went to the veterans who had fought alongside him, to Elizabeth's unwavering bravery, and to the young kid who was carrying the flag. It was not for glory that he served. Rather, it was for the heritage carried on by those who had come before him. His thoughts were filled with the creed of the tomb guard, which read, "My dedication to this duty is unyielding. I am not going to give up." In Michael's position, what actions would you take? If you knew that danger was only a few inches away, would you be able to maintain your composure and act with such precision when the time came? The men and women who defend the heart of our nation do it not merely with ceremony, but with unyielding determination throughout the entire process. Explain your opinions to me. Have you ever witnessed someone rise to the occasion in a situation such as this one? What does it signify to you that Hallowed Memorial Park is a place Keep the tales of those who have passed away alive so that we can remember and honor them. The text comes to an end at this point, but Michael's watch continues. 21 steps, turn, pause, each one a demonstration of duty, courage, and loyalty to the United States of America.